Another month has passed. It's horror movie time. Indeed, yet another month has passed, and I need to know to whom we should be addressing our letters to petition the government to just stop the calendar for a little while and give us all a day, a week, a month to catch up on things, because time seems to be getting away from us. But never mind all that. The most important thing is we still have horror movies with which to pass what little free time we might be able to carve out of our busy schedules. And I have 2 more packages of horror movies courtesy of the fine folks at HorrorPack, the monthly horror movie subscription service. Every month they send me a package of DVDs and a package of Blu-rays, including in the Blu-ray package a HorrorPack exclusive, which is always fun to dig in and see what they've sent. I subscribe. I've been subscribed for a while, as those of you who've been around for a while know, and I like to open those up here on this channel and see what I've got. And since I've just received the August of 2023 horror packs, I suppose it's time to open them up and see what's inside. So let's go ahead and do that. I should mention, for those of you who might be interested in any of these films, if you don't have copies and you want to get copies for yourself, there will be purchase links for all of them, or at least all of them that I can find, down in the What's It, where you will also find information about my various other projects outside of this channel. And just to tease you a little bit, there's some very exciting news coming on that front very, very soon. In fact, perhaps the next video you see might be regarding some of those other projects. I can't say too much, although I suppose the cat's already out of the bag for a lot of you, but for those of you who don't know, news is coming soon. Anyway, I've got the 2 packages right here, so without further ado, let's dive in and see what the fine folks over at the HorrorPack company have sent for this August of 2023. I do always like to start with the DVD pack, and that be this one right here, so let's dive right in and see what they sent us this month. The first one I received is a film called Deadly Playthings. We have a picture of a rather creepy looking doll on the front. This is a film with which I'm unfamiliar, presumably some kind of evil doll or evil child story. But let's read the description on the back and see how accurate my guess actually is. The description says, a child's mysterious doll, once home to restless and disembodied spirits, is handed down to the occupants of a new home. So apparently I was correct. It's an evil doll or a haunted doll. Carrying on, it says, the doll, found hidden in the dark recesses of the basement, is adopted by a lonely, near-mute, wheelchair-bound girl. Soon the loving family is thrown into a living hell, but the violent deaths and supernatural occurrences bring the doll back into contact with the one person who may be able to help its original owner. She knows what evil has taken roots within it, and ultimately what spirit wants. I should say what the spirit wants, presumably. Anyway, never mind that. It all leads to an explosive final showdown between psychic and demon, with the young girl's soul hanging in the balance. So, it's a haunted doll story. We've seen many of them. I suspect the best known these days is probably Annabelle. There's also, of course, Chucky, or the Child's Play movies. There's the legend of Robert the doll, the supposedly true story about the doll that's now housed in a museum, I believe in Florida. And this follows similar storylines from the sound of it, but I do like a haunted doll story, so I'm looking forward to trying Deadly Playthings. Next up, out of the DVD package, we have Bloodsuckers Collection. This is a anthology or a collection of 4 films. And reading off of the back, those 4 films are The Breed, The Cave, The Forsaken, and Vampires, The Turning. So, just in the interest of time, I'm not going to jibber-jabber much about these. I'm just going to read the descriptions for all 4 as quickly as I can. The description for The Breed says, FBI agent Stephen Grant is reluctantly assigned to track a renegade bloodsucker that is bent on exposing a government plan to integrate vampires into society. Along with his new partner, good vampire cop Aaron Gray, Grant follows the clues and the bodies to the lair of the stunningly beautiful Lucy. Trusting any vampire is difficult for Grant, but when he finds himself falling for Lucy and her exotic charms, the line between the good guys and the bad guys begins to blur, and his next move could be his last. So, some sort of erotic law enforcement government conspiracy vampire story. It's not one that I've seen, but that combines quite a lot of intriguing elements. The description on The Cave says, deep in the Romanian forest, a team of scientists stumbles upon the ruins of a 13th century abbey. On further inspection, they make a startling discovery. The abbey is built over the entrance to a giant underground cave system. Local biologists believe the cave could be home to an undiscovered ecosystem, so they hire a group of American cave explorers to help them investigate its depths. And I don't know exactly what they might find in the depths of that cave, but any good horror fan will tell you when you go exploring deep in an unexplored, previously undiscovered cave system, you're gonna find something evil. So that's intriguing. The next one is The Forsaken, and the description says, a cross-country road trip takes a dangerous detour when the driver for hire Sean picks up Nick, a hitchhiker who is on the trail of a band of vampires. At a roadside diner, they encounter a crazed and helpless woman, a recent victim of a vampire feeding, and Sean becomes infected. Now, the three must race against time to track down and kill the source of the virus, a centuries-old vampire with superhuman strength and an appetite for blood. Seems like that would sort of go with the territory with vampires, but anyway, it continues to say, a hard-driving, adrenaline-pumping thriller in the infectious tradition of The Lost Boys and John Carpenter's Vampires, The Forsaken will scare the daylights out of you. So, fairly traditional vampire stuff. We've got some people who get infected with the vampire contagion and they try to hunt down the source of said contagion. Presumably an action-packed sort of a vampire story. And then we have Vampires the Turning, the description of which says, for 800 years they fought to the death among the dark shadows of Thailand's exotic nights. Two armies of vampires. One, ruthless allies of the evil Niran, who delight in feasting on human blood. The other, loyal followers of the beautiful Song Nang, battling to end Niran's brutal reign of terror. Suddenly, trapped in this eerie underworld are two American tourists, Amanda, kidnapped by Niran and turned into his blood slave, and Connor, her boyfriend, desperate to save her soul. Now, faced with the ultimate sacrifice, Connor must either join the fight against the forces of darkness or risk losing Amanda forever in this taut martial arts-packed tale of terror. So we have another action-packed vampire action, in this case martial arts action sort of a movie. So these all sound quite intriguing. Three of them explicitly mention vampires. One of them does not, but given the apparent theme of the collection, presumably that other one, The Cave, also involves vampires, and presumably it's some bloodsuckers that they find deep in the cave. So I'm looking forward to trying all four of these, none of which I have actually seen before. Next up we have a thin one, and it is called The Fergusons. The tagline here says, they like their neighbors, medium rare. If you've ever lived in a homeowners association, I think that seems appropriate. Enough said. This is a film that I believe I have heard of, but I've never actually seen it, so let's read the description and see what this one says. It tells us, suburbia will never be the same after a family moves in next door with special tastes in neighbors, especially for those who try to step on them. Then it's time to take out the trash, which they merrily do. In fact, they love takeout. Blissfully square, Ed Ferguson and his family are goody types, easy targets for jealous neighbors, crooks, and vandals. People take advantage of their generous nature and walk over them. But they're a cheerful bunch and can't be bothered. Oh sure, those pesky neighbors are slaughtered in short order and even get served up as just desserts, but they're killed with no hard feelings. This family doesn't get mad, they just get full. Keith Singleton writes, directs, and stars in this twisted take on consumerism with the question, can consumption be done about it? So this sounds like a horror comedy about cannibalistic neighbors who might not actually be the villains if in fact they are only eating crooks and vandals and those sorts of people, but presumably it's the sort of over-the-top violent gore fest with a little sprinkling of comedy that we all love to enjoy, and I'm looking forward to trying the Fergusons as well. And finally, for the DVD pack, we have a film entitled Slaughter Drive. This one looks and sounds quite familiar for some reason. I don't know that I've seen it, and in fact it could look familiar just because this cover art, while good and certainly the sort of thing that would catch my eye if I were looking at it in a store, does seem familiar. It looks like a lot of other horror covers, so that could be tricking me into thinking that I've heard about this one I hadn't. Regardless, I don't think I've seen it, so let's read the description and see what we're in for with Slaughter Drive. It says, when failed filmmaker Doug Stevenson leaves his video camera in the local park overnight, he accidentally records something horrific. To top it off, it might have something to do with his new neighbors that moved into his quiet suburban neighborhood. With the help of his bumbling teacher buddies, Doug goes on a wild ride to save himself, his friends, his ex-wife, and the entire neighborhood. Featuring a killer throwback soundtrack and splattery practical effects, find out who will stay alive on Slaughter Drive. I do like the sound of that in terms of practical effects. Almost always superior to CGI. I also quite like the idea of leaving a video camera in a local park and having it somehow not go missing, which is presumably what would happen in the parks where I live. But in this case, it doesn't go missing, but instead it records something horrific and he finds it later. I like that idea. Taking a sort of found footage idea of accidentally recording something and then pasting that into a more traditional film should be an effective sort of a technique, and I can't wait to see what his camera has actually recorded. So I will, as I say with all of these, be looking forward to watching Slaughter Drive. And that brings us, of course, to the Blu-ray pack. Before I dive into that, let me just remind you, as I like to do in every video, to like, share, subscribe, ring that notification bell, leave me a comment, and all of those kinds of things that help me get the word out about this channel and grow my audience so that I can keep making these videos, and in fact, all of the creepy, spooky, horror-themed kinds of videos that I like to make for y'all. But enough advertising, let's get right to the Blu-rays, the first of which is Slender Man. Of course, I know the Slender Man mythology very well, and I am familiar with this movie. I'm aware of it, but I have not seen it yet. So I'm actually looking forward to this one a lot because it's one of those that I've been meaning to watch for quite a while. The description here says, in a small town in Massachusetts, a group of friends perform a ritual in an attempt to debunk the lore of Slender Man. When one of them goes mysteriously missing, they begin to suspect that she is in fact his latest victim. That doesn't really tell us a whole lot. Just to give you a little bit of background if you don't know Slender Man, he is a character that looks, well, sort of like this. Very tall, with limbs that are thin and longer than they should be, not quite human. Very tall and thin, often depicted wearing a suit, a black suit, and a black tie. And there's all kinds of lore about this Slender Man character and the kinds of things that he does or makes people do. There have even been true crime stories in which the perpetrators have claimed to have been inspired by the Slender Man lore. So there's a whole mythology, and At some point, I'll probably make a video about the history of Slender Man. Let me know in the comments if that's something you would be interested in. I'll probably get to it eventually. But for now, the movie seems to take him sort of at surface level, present him as basically just a monster, ignoring some of the more complex elements of the lore. But as monsters go, he seems like a fairly effective one, so Slender Man should be an intriguing watch. Next, we have a film entitled Kicking Blood. This is one I have not heard of at all, but the tagline says it's a vampire love story. Presumably not in the Twilight sort of sense of a vampire love story, but in the hopefully actually good sense of a vampire love story. But let's read the description and see what we're in for. It says, Anna has been living in a haze of psychedelic blood bliss for as long as she can remember. Her hedonistic existence is challenged when she falls for Robbie, a charming alcoholic, one night. He is looking for a drink. She is looking for a feed. They bond. This puts her at odds with her true murderous nature and the wrath of her vampire clan, but she has vowed to quit blood and become human again. So, yes, not a straight vampire story, but in fact a vampire romance, but it sounds like the vampires in this case are actually the nasty bloodsuckers that vampires are meant to be. So I don't mind adding some romance to a horror story. In fact, I think it's a wise idea. I only object to it when it goes stupid, and it doesn't sound like this is going in that direction, so I am certainly looking forward to giving Kicking Blood a try. And now that I say that, I finally understand what kicking blood means. It's referring to kicking an addiction to blood. I didn't get that at first. I get it now. Anyway, looking forward to watching it. Next, from the Blu-ray pack, we have a film entitled The Possession of Hannah Grace. This one I have seen, and I will withhold my full review because, in case you don't know, every 6 months I do a mass review in which I talk about all of these movies all at once, and I give a reasonably detailed, obviously I'm not spending an hour on each movie, but I give a reasonable detailed review of each one, sort them into which ones I loved, which ones I liked, which ones didn't work for me. And because I'm coming up on my anniversary of having subscribed to HorrorPack, those reviews are coming very soon indeed. So anyway, I will save my more in-depth review of this film for that. But I have seen it. Just to fill you in, let's read the description, which says, a shocking exorcism spirals out of control, claiming the life of a young woman. Months later, Megan Reed is working the graveyard shift in the morgue when she takes delivery of a disfigured cadaver. Locked alone inside the basement corridors, Megan begins to experience horrifying visions and starts to suspect that the body may be possessed by a ruthless demonic force. So that pretty much tells you what it's about. And to give you some very brief thoughts, again, deferring most of the thoughts until the review, I liked it but didn't love it. I think this is in many ways reminiscent of The Autopsy of Jane Doe, which I thought handled it better. But there are still some good scenes in this one, some creepy moments. I love the setting of working the graveyard shift at the morgue. Sounds like kind of a fun job to me. I'm weird that way. I do recommend it, and I will share some more thoughts later on after I have rewatched The Possession of Hannah Grace. And finally, we have what must be the HorrorPack exclusive. The spine is lost in the crease on the cellophane. Now I can read it. It's exclusive number 86, and it's a film entitled The Frankenstein Syndrome. Presumably, we're dealing with a Frankensteinian sort of a story. I always like those, particularly the original novel, of course, but I've liked some of the film adaptations and some of the spin-offs and retellings as well. Let's see what this one tells us on the back. And holy mackerel, that print is tiny, so forgive me for holding this the case in front of my face as I attempt to read this At some point I'll get new spectacles and won't have to do this. But for now, the description says, a group of researchers led by Dr. Elizabeth Barnes, while conducting underground illegal stem cell research, discover a cell anomaly that has the potential to regenerate dead tissue and restore life itself. That does indeed sound very Frankensteinian. Carrying on, it says, when a security guard, David Doyle, threatens to sue the research company and wants to leave the project, he is promptly murdered and used as a test subject. So we're diverging a bit from the Frankenstein source material here, but interesting nonetheless. And it carries on to say, David returns to life, but he is not the same man he once was. Not only are his personality and memory changed, but he appears to have acquired psychic and telekinetic powers, as well as increased strength and aggression. David begins to act out against the researchers who, all at once, are his captors, murderers, and creators. So it seems like we're starting from a very Frankensteinian sort of idea of this underground stem cell research, being used as a method of resurrection. That's quite intriguing. And I like that it brings a modern scientific idea of stem cell research onto the Frankenstein substrate or Frankenstein base story. Even though, of course, that isn't actually possible with stem cell research, but we can, well, it wasn't possible to reanimate dead tissue with a bolt of lightning in the original Frankenstein either, so we can suspend disbelief. The idea that this then turns into sort of a revenge story diverges from the Frankenstein source material, but I think it does so in a way that I think could be quite productive. So I am very intrigued by this film. Of course, I've never heard of it. I tend not to have heard of most of these HorrorPack exclusives, but I do tend to find most of them range from the good to the great, and I'm looking forward to figuring out where this new one lands on that spectrum. And so there we go, 8 new movies. Actually more than 8 because one of them had 4 films in it, so I guess 11 new movies. Only one of which I have actually seen, a couple of which I've heard of, and several that are entirely new to me. So that's what I really like about these subscription services, because I might not have purchased some of these movies. I might not have even watched some of them on the streaming services. I might never have heard of some of them. And a lot of them, even the ones I've never heard of or would never have heard of, end up being really good and sometimes favorite films. So that's the wonderful thing about HorrorPack, and I am, as I say with all of them, very much looking forward to diving in and watching all of these movies. As I mentioned a moment ago, it is just about time for my mass review, in which I will review all of these as well as all of the ones I've received over the previous 6 months. I don't know exactly how long it'll take me to get that out, because I still have some from previous months that I still need to watch because I've been busy and I haven't quite made it through all of them yet. I've seen a lot of them, not quite all of them. And then I've still got to get through these, so it's going to be probably a couple of weeks, maybe going on a month. But regardless of how long it takes me to get through all of these and get my reviews compiled and written and recorded, and then the video edited and posted and all of those things, whenever all that happens, I'm sure y'all are looking forward to it. I'm sure you can't wait to see it, so do make sure you're subscribed and have that notification bell clicked so that you won't miss out on that, or any of my other videos, including my big announcement that I've been teasing for a little while. I also do promise to be a little bit more regular with my videos in the coming months. I realize I've been slacking off, but once you see what I've been working on outside of this channel, I think you'll understand why. Anyway, I do believe I've prattled on for quite long enough, so I'm going to go watch some movies. You're going to do all those likey, sharey, subscribey, YouTubey kinds of things. And until next time, the most important thing, as always, take care and stay scared.